a truly lively session of Off the Cuff or OTC this evening in Bombay. Lively not because I'm here, but because we have a stellar guest, columnist and writer Tom Friedman, who's come all the way from Washington, not New York.
Yeah.
New York Times, but Washington.
Yes.
So thank you for being here, Tom.
Thank you, Sheikh.
And also because we have a brilliant audience. So Tom, let's get started. The title of your latest book is Thank You for Being Late.
Yes.
So where does the title come from, and what's the contribution people make to your life by being late?
So my book is called Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in the Age of Accelerations. And the title actually comes from meeting people in Washington, D.C., where I live, for breakfast. And I like to have business breakfasts downtown when I'm in town and not waste breakfast by eating alone. And every once in a while, someone comes 10 or 15 minutes late. And they'll often say, Tom, I'm really sorry. It was the weather, the traffic, the subway, the dog ate my homework. And one day, 3.5 years ago now, a friend of mine, Peter Corcel, came 15 minutes late for breakfast and said, Tom, I'm really sorry, the weather, the traffic, the subway. And I just spontaneously said to him, actually, Peter, thank you for being late. Because you were late, I've been eavesdropping on their conversation. Fascinating. I've been people watching the lobby. Fantastic. And best of all, I just connected two ideas I've been struggling with for a month. My favorite quote from the front of the book is from my friend Dov Seidman, who says, when you press the pause button on a computer, it stops. But when you press the pause button on a human being, it starts. That's when it starts to reflect, rethink, and reimagine.
So what happens when you sit back and pause? Does your mind get dewired from all the devices? In fact, we spend all our time looking at our devices now. Even in a car, we don't even see road signs.
Yeah. What the book really argues is that we are in an age of acceleration, and the world is being reshaped by three giant accelerations in what I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law. So Mother Nature for me is climate change, biodiversity loss, population growth, particularly in the developing world. The market for me is globalization, but digital globalization, not the old globalization of containers on ships. And Moore's Law is the term coined by Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, in 1965, that the speed and power of microchips would double roughly every 24 months. And that has been true since 1965. Now it's closer to 30 months, but never mind, it's held. And my argument, Shekhar, is that the faster the world gets, the more everything old and slow matters more than ever. Good parenting to good child, good teacher to good student, good bureaucrat to good citizen, good spiritual leader to good congregant. The more all this old stuff, which you have to do face to face, the more it matters more than ever. And so that's the subtext of the book. It's calling for a return to pausing and a return to real values.
For someone who's been a foreign affairs columnist, how do we create the mind space, and where do you see the need to create the mind space to write something so reflective?
I have covered the Middle East as a reporter and a columnist for the New York Times for 40 years, basically. And about 6-7 years ago, I surveyed what I had been reporting and what I had been opining about. And I woke up and realized basically everything I advocated and hoped for had failed. Okay, so has failed.
So will you list some?
Yeah, I mean, whether Camp David or Arab Spring or democracy in Iraq or Israeli-Palestinian peace, Oslo, all the things I had really been pushing, all the rocks I had been pushing up the hill, they had all rolled back down on me. I decided to really bring my energy back to America. And so I wrote a book about America called That Used to Be Us, how America lost its way in the world it invented and how we can come back. And I coined the term nation building at home. So I want to take all that energy I've been focused on the Middle East and bring it to America. And then a few years ago, I woke up and I looked around at America and I discovered that the Middle East had followed me home. That we had become Sunnis and Shiites. We called them Democrats and Republicans, but we had become Sunnis and Shiites. That the kind of tribal sectarianism that had so infected the Middle East and debilitated it had begun to infect America. And so I finally decided to take my energy all the way back home to where I started, to a little town in Minnesota where I grew up that had the biggest influence on me, because I grew up in a small town outside of Minneapolis called St. Louis Park, in a time and place where politics worked. And could I learn lessons there that I could bring back to Washington or to the Middle East and share with the world again? And that is the sub-theme of the whole book.
Tomorrow morning, I make it a point, in fact, I'm making it a point to go to Jaipur for a very right-wing dialogue of the robust right, where,
Wow.
because they asked me, I'm happy to go as the outsider and deal with whatever comes, because I think it's tragic that we've stopped talking with that
it's
this whole
terrible.
them versus us business has begun. In fact, all of us now only want to read what we agree with.
Yeah.
And I think you face the same problem with your columns.
I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I wouldn't know WhatsApp if it was sitting on my lap, okay? I know who my friends are, and they're not a thumb up or a thumb down. And anything said about me in 140 characters, I think is a sign of the apocalypse. So I talk the talk of globalization, but I do not walk the walk. And you know, for me, the internet is an open sewer of untreated, unfiltered information. It has incredible diamonds and rubies in it, but it also has broken glass, rusty cans, and you know, very sharp nails. And if you aren't building the internal filters into your kids and your citizens to filter out the broken cans and the rusty nails from the diamonds and the rubies, you have a real problem. And those filters can only be built the old-fashioned way.
Among a world filled with these broken cans and rusty nails, also comes the master of many rusty nails. In fact, he conjures up a few every morning, early morning when he wakes up, Donald Trump, on Twitter. How does the world deal with him? How does America deal with him? And does his rise and the fact that he will be around 3 more years, does it mean that, I'm asking many questions, that the decline of America and the rise of China and Xi Jinping is now an inevitability? Tom said the other day that that Trump understands China so little that if Xi Jinping wanted, he could sell the Brooklyn Bridge to Trump, and Trump will flaunt it as an achievement.
I was deeply worried about Trump being elected, and he's exceeded all my worries. And what Trump is attacking every day is truth and trust. He is a person who lies as he breathes. We have simply never had in our country a leader who simply stands up and bald-faced lies and then gets everyone else to start lying around him on a daily basis at an industrial scale. Okay? We've never seen that before. And we've never seen someone so ready to attack the core institutions of our society. Just this week, the Attorney General announced that he's studying the possibility of investigating Hillary Clinton over a uranium sale that she had nothing to do with, that happened 7 years ago, a complete invention of Fox News, basically. That's what they do in banana republics. You arrest and investigate the person you defeat in an election. We don't do that in our country.
We are not a banana republic, but unfortunately, that is the norm in India as well.
I really worry that 4 years of him, that we will erode these basic norms of truth and trust so badly that whoever succeeds him, God forbid in 8 years, hopefully in 3 years or in 7 years, that we will have lost something precious.
And you think America's decline would then be irreversible?
I never really believe in irreversible, Shekhar, to be honest, but we'll be in a bad place. We will be in a very, very bad place. I believe we're in the middle of 3 climate changes at once right now. We're in the middle of a change of the climate. We're going from what I call later to now. Today, later is officially over in environmental terms. Now later will be too late. You don't fix the air in Delhi, okay, in this window, oh my God, you will really have made irrecoverable structural damage. I think we're in the middle of the change of the climate of globalization. We're going from a world that is interconnected to a world that is interdependent. That's a climate change. In an interdependent world, your friends can kill you faster than your enemies. So if Greek and Italian banks go under, you will feel it here in India. And I will really feel it in America. That is a climate change. Your rivals falling becomes more dangerous than your rivals rising. And lastly, we're in a change of the climate of technology. Because of the combination of artificial intelligence, the cloud, and big data, every company now can, and therefore must, analyze, optimize, prophesize, customize, and digitize-automatize any job, product, or service. Well, when you're in the middle of a climate change, small errors in navigation have huge consequences. So leadership matters more than ever. There's no good time for Donald Trump to be president of the United States, but this is a uniquely bad time. So think of those 3 climate changes and what is China doing and what are we doing? In response to the change of the climate, China is making massive investments in clean energy, okay? In the change of the climate of globalization, China is pretending to globalize with One Belt, One Road and the Asian Infrastructure Bank. I say pretending because it's Chinese globalization. It's globalization with Chinese characteristics, which is to say globalization for me and not for you, okay? Because China still maintains a 25% tariff on imported cars when America has 2.5%. And China says Tencent and Alibaba can have cloud servers in Silicon Valley, but Amazon and Microsoft cannot have cloud servers in the Pearl River Delta, independent cloud servers. But they're globalizing in their own way and they're getting away with it. And lastly, in the terms of the change of the climate of technology, China has a program called Made in China 2025 to invest in the 10 emerging strategic industries. What is Trump doing? On the change in the climate, he's investing in coal, trying to revive the coal industry, and has appointed avowed climate change deniers to every key environmental post. In response to the change of the climate of globalization, he tore up the Trans-Pacific Free Trade Partnership deal before he came the first day in office without having even read it. So rather than negotiating with Xi Jinping as the head of a 12-nation trading bloc that controls 40% of global GDP, built on American interests and values, he's negotiating with Xi Jinping with his pants down, basically, with no leverage at all. And in response to the change of the climate of technology, Trump basically is saying, we have a saying in English, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And Trump's philosophy is, I'll take any road on health care that has my name on it. I will take any tax bill that has my name on it.
But today I was rather alarmed and surprised at the negative tone
Yes.
in which you looked at the internet phenomenon,
Yeah.
calling it
Open sewer.
open sewer, bed of nails, etc.
Yeah.
It seems more like a drain inspector's report to me, rather than looking at the enormous good and change that the internet age is bringing upon us, and our necessity to adapt to this rather than criticize it.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. I'm emphasizing certain negative aspects. I very much appreciate the positive ones. My actual position I'm trying to get across is to get the positive ones, we do have to invest, I think, more time in building the filters so people can use it effectively. Because I've just come out of an experience where countries hostile to the United States, one in particular, use the internet to affect our election. The ease with which someone now can intervene in my election has me alarmed. And the tools they use were all online tools. And for less than the cost of a MiG-29, Russia helped to tilt our election. And that is a very frightening thing to me.
So,
But by the way, your election will be next.
You outlined a whole bunch of prompts, and increasingly, most of them that you've mentioned, climate change, the information technology, etc., are transnational. The question I have is, in today's climate, where you have increasing amount of disengagement, both at the political level and also between people and their government, where do you see us actually coming to a solution?
It gets back to my point about why there's no good time to have Trump as president, but there's sometimes are worse than others. And at a time where these problems are cropping up everywhere, the last thing you want is someone who says, let's take America out of the game. America first now. We're not really interested in you, your concerns, or whatnot. And because there's only one way to govern such a world, through things like the Paris Climate Accord, through things like the Internet Standards, bodies, that we've got to find ways to collaborate. You want, in that kind of world, you want an India, you want an America, you want a Russia, you want a China, that is saying, look, I'm looking out for my interests, but my interests will never be secure unless there's some balance with the others. And I feel that was a role America uniquely played in the past, after World War II, in building these global institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, the global trading system. And it pains me that we have a president who is completely deaf to all of these things.
Tom, isn't that part of his appeal also?
Shekhar, I'm all for insurgents. It's great to be someone challenging the system. But Trump is an insurgent with only one paragraph, okay? I'm tearing up TPP. Ask him what his approach is the morning after he tears up. There's no second paragraph for anything. Let's get rid of Obamacare. What's the alternative? I don't have one. Congress, bring me one.
If he has a paragraph,
Yeah,
it's 140 characters.
absolutely.
Only.
That's all he's
Very
got.
short paragraph, yes.
Well, how do you prophesize this threat from the rocket man, as Trump calls him,
Yes.
or North Korea? Does it keep you up at night?
It really is troubling. There's no question about it. It's a problem that has been produced by Republican and Democratic administrations, each one passing the hot potato to the other, because the challenge of North Korea is you have three choices if you're America right now. You can bomb, you can acquiesce, or you can negotiate. That was what Obama said vis-a-vis Iran. And he didn't want to bomb and he didn't want to acquiesce, so he negotiated. And I think negotiated a very rational deal that was in Iran's interest and ours. But Trump, of course, is tougher and smarter and, so he's not going to negotiate. He'd never negotiate with little rocket man. He'd never acquiesce because we are so tough, we are so strong. Problem is he can't bomb. And so he's actually paralyzed. So I think there is an opening for negotiation. We will not get everything we want. North Korea will not surrender all of its nuclear weapons. But I think in collaboration with China, we could get to a point where we shrink their arsenal, freeze their testing, so they cannot get a missile that can hit Los Angeles. And that's what I'd be going for. Perfect is not on the menu. Good is not on the menu. Fairly good is not on the menu. But maybe kind of crummy is on the menu.
What about Saudi Arabia? You're coming from thereabouts now, the Middle East now. All the changes we've had, what does this mean?
Saudi Arabia is in a really interesting transition.
Do you welcome it?
And I welcome it, yes. I've had a chance to interview the Crown Prince a couple times. And there are several things I learned from my interactions with him. One is he's much more McKinsey than Wahhabi, okay? Much more data-driven analyst than religious ideologue. He's much more of a advocate of KPIs than more Quran, basically. I think his project of moderating Saudi Islam, which took a real right turn in 1979, is hugely important for the world, for India, and I think his desire to reform the economy is hugely important. The big question I have, Shekhar, is it too late? I don't know.
But you do wish that he's successful.
Oh, I'm praying for him, and you should pray for him as well. Because instability in Saudi Arabia would have vast and global consequences.
You mentioned about the 3 types of climate changes which are happening concurrently, and you talked about how China is dealing in their own way with all 3 of them.
Yes.
What's your assessment on what India is doing in those 3?
First of all, I've only been here 3 days, but it's one of the questions I came here with. I happen to think, if you're an American and someone came to you and said, what's the most important thing that's happened in the world in the last year or 2? Well, you'd say it was Trump's election or Brexit or whatever. But if you were a Martian and you came to Earth and someone asked you as a Martian who got see the whole world, what do you think is the most important thing that's happened in the whole world in the last few years? I would tell you 2 things. One, China has become a cashless society, a cashless economy. You go to China today, no, women don't carry purses, men don't carry wallets. Beggars have QR codes in their bowl. You just scan your phone over it and donate things, okay? That is a big deal.
In India, it's called Paytm.
And the other thing I would tell you is like really big deal is that India built a system that now has over 1 billion people with unique, authentic IDs. And on that system, on that platform, the applications you can now build when people have trusted IDs, I think is going to be enormous. If India were a stock, I'd buy it. I don't think people fully appreciate the power of that platform. And I really have a soft spot for Modi for not throwing it out, that it wasn't his idea.
Across the world, we are getting impacted by election results in the
Yes.
Western world, in
Yeah.
the US, in Europe.
Yeah.
And there are, as you said, insurgencies that are
Yes.
taking place. Often one gets a sense that it is not so much the support for a candidate because that candidate doesn't really appear that good.
Yeah.
It is more hatred for the establishment.
Very well said.
Is there a sense that the establishment across the Western world, by that I mean the academia, media,
Yes.
business elites, that they have ignored their working classes for too long? There are demographies within the white working class which have actually had declining life expectancies
Yes,
in the last
absolutely.
10, 15 years, which is shocking
No
for a
question,
developed
yeah.
country. And as a result of that disdain, that ignorance of the real problems of the working class, the rest
Yes.
of the world is suffering. And is the establishment really looking at solving this problem?
Yes. So Trump's election was fed by many different rivers, okay? Let's keep the Hillary Clinton factor out, forget about Russia. What were the real things going on there? One, it was a rebellion against political correctness on American college campuses. So at the exact time Trump was rising, in October, so he came out, I believe it was like in August or whatever, the president of Yale University sent a memo to all the students on Halloween. Be careful who you dress up as. You may offend somebody. So don't wear a sombrero. You may offend a Mexican American, you know, all of these things. So the wife of the master of a Yale college, Silliman College, wrote a parody of that. I kind of, seriously, I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's Halloween, okay? The students of that college were so upset that the wife of the master, who's not even an official of the college, wrote that they demanded that master be fired. They said that her memo made them feel unwelcome, not at home, and that their college was not a safe space. Okay. You can't make this stuff up, I'm sorry. There was a scene in the college where a group of students surrounded the master, and someone captured all on video, and a young African-American girl student screamed at him, "Who the fuck gave you your job?" That went viral on Breitbart, Fox TV. It went everywhere. And trust me, that was one river that fed the Trump voters. That political correctness on our campuses is just out of control. Trump's voters hate the people who hate Trump more than they care about Trump. They sense that these elites look down on them. Because I've really spent most of my career covering people acting out on their sense of humiliation, okay, and seeking dignity. And that's a big part of what you Eastern elites, you look down on us. Now, there's a lot of leaders around the world have learned to very effectively play this humiliation card. Erdogan in Turkey, Putin in Russia, Netanyahu in Israel. And Trump played it brilliantly.
Not much different here as well, because in this country, 85% majority has psyched itself into feeling like a humiliated.
Like you already mentioned, you're not on the social networks.
Yes.
Which I feel is a good thing.
Yeah.
I want to know what kind of filters your email has, but do you get trolled on your email?
Yes.
And my second question is, if any advice you would like to give our government, would that be to sign or not to sign with Mr. Trump any treaties going forward?
Is that I actually started my career in Beirut. I covered the most neuralgic issue for the New York Times, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, basically for 40 years. So I am really used to being written about and trashed, okay? Long before there were internet trolls.
From
okay?
both sides.
From both sides, yes,
Both sides.
exactly. And so because of that, if you're tweeting at me, about me, or against me on the internet, y'all have fun, because I'm not there. And I do not care, okay? My view is anything said about me in 140 characters is a sign of the apocalypse, okay? And I am on to the next thing. My motto as a writer and as a journalist is, and you shall know them by their books, not by their blogs, not by their tweets, and not by their Facebook posts. So I'm always on to the next book. I have never once in 40 years responded to a critic. Not because I'm not listening, not because I'm even not taking the criticism that I see seriously. It's that I'm on to the next thing. Yeah, my advice to anyone with dealing with Trump is be careful. Because Donald Trump is out for Donald Trump, okay? He's out for power, wealth, and fame. He is an indecent and dishonest man. And I'm appalled that he is President of the United States.
Social media has both sides if you look at
Yes.
it, but the most important is what you look for yourself. And how can we help our kids,
Yes.
the coming up generation, to make them realize that what is the importance of having this life and not being on, totally onto
Yes.
those social media.
Every American school and every Indian school from kindergarten on has to have a class every year called digital civics. Digital civics. What does it mean to be a citizen in a digital world? And how do I relate to facts on the internet? That when you see a story, when you see a fact, immediately don't go out, go sideways. Is this true? How can I check this? And we're going to have to teach kids to do that from a very, very young age. That has to be the first impulse now. Teaching digital civics, not just how to check things, but how to talk to another person. What kind of language do you use? Just because you're anonymous or you're at a distance doesn't give you the license to tear someone down.
Do you believe that Islamophobia exists? And is it the biggest polarizing factor in the world today?
Question of Islam, politics, modernity, terrorism, have really beguiled all of us. But to witness what happened in Bombay at the Taj Hotel I'm staying at is to understand that there are also trends and movements in Islam that are deeply hostile to the other. That there is a problem with pluralism, okay? Gender pluralism and religious pluralism, both within Islam, between Sunni and Shia, we see that playing out, and between Islam and other faiths, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity. So obviously there's a struggle going on. And I've always thought that the war of ideas within Islam, not the war with Islam, was the most important war to be encouraging and fighting. So I will simply tell you my approach. And my approach is not the approach that says, all these people doing things like the Taj Hotel, they're not real Muslims. They're just pretending to be Muslims. They have nothing to do with Islam. That's just not true. There's a direct line between them and stuff that was being taught in Saudi Arabia in very mainstream mosques and madrasas. And we fool ourselves if we turn away from that. At the same time, it doesn't define all of Islam. And so my approach is to engage with my Muslim friends and interlocutors in a constructive way. And my approach is to say, I looked at these guys at the Taj Hotel, and they clearly were inspired and drew permission for what they did from their faith. I need you to explain that to me. And isn't it interesting that there were no Indian Muslims in 9/11? Why is that? Could it be because there was an Indian Muslim woman on the Indian Supreme Court? Could it be at the time the richest man in India was an Indian Muslim, Azim Premji? Could it be, because here Muslims can have the freedom to have that discussion? So I'm a big believer that context is everything. That the context within a religion, that where religion lives is nested with, and the way it relates to other religions, it's huge. And when you have a religion that's nested in a context of deep authoritarianism, brutal repressiveness, is it any wonder you get these real perversions? And when you have a religion that's nested in a much more open and synchronistic context, not that there aren't issues here, I'm not naive about that, but you get a very different Islam. So my philosophy is you got to engage this question, challenge people, but do it in a constructive way. It doesn't humiliate people, so they feel relaxed to have that conversation.
Earlier, you mentioned that while talking to Mr. Bedi, that your election will be next. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Look, I could imagine a group of hackers in Pakistan say, we want the most right-wing, nationalist, anti-Muslim president in India because that'll radicalize the situation and be bad for India and India-Pakistan and all the moderates. And using the same techniques that Putin used with us. And let's remember what Mark Zuckerberg said. When the first time people said, people use your platform, he said, that's a crazy idea. Then he said, oops, maybe not so crazy, but it wasn't very serious. Then he said, I shouldn't have said crazy. And then he said, 128 million Americans were touched by messages that were faked by Russian groups. So if it can happen to us, it can happen to you.
We have a clear employment crisis which is not being alleviated in any way. And in fact, what's happening very recently is that the IT sector, which we all look to with great hope, has been shedding thousands of jobs, partly because automation is making these lower-end service jobs obsolete. Do you think that we're actually looking at a future in which economic employment is not central to human life?
You see a lot of studies these days. One famous one said that 47.3% of all current jobs are going to be gone by 2050 or whatever. I read those studies and I say, really, 47.3? Not 47.2? Not 47.4? Who the hell knows what jobs will be here in 2050? So how about a little faith in humanity? The next great industry is going to be connecting hearts to hearts. So I did a column with my friend Seidman again. We pointed out that for many years people worked with their hands. Then for many more years they work with their heads. And I think in the world we're going into, many more people will work with their hearts. I would simply tell you this. This is my prediction. In 10 years, the biggest job site in the world will be Airbnb. Pay attention to this. So you go to Airbnb today, you'll go because you want to come to the Mumbai Lit Festival and I need a room in Mumbai and somebody's renting them. So there's an icon that says homes. You press that. But now go to Airbnb and you'll notice there's an icon next to it. It's called experiences. It is the fastest growing part of Airbnb. It grew tenfold over the last year. What's experiences? There's somebody there giving night tours of Bombay slums, okay, for small groups. There's someone teaching tandoori cooking. There's someone I wrote about in the book who he gives tours of 3-man basketball courts in Havana by night. $35 a person, 5 people, and you get a mojito at the end of the trip. And I quoted a mother who sent her 18-year-old American mother on the kids' trip. He came back at 2 in the morning. He had so much fun with the Cuban guys he met in 3-man basketball courts. People are monetizing their passions. People are monetizing their hobbies. And I guarantee you in 10 years, there's going to be so much work that flowers from it.
In our country, Digital India is one of the flagship programs of the government currently. And let me just bring this to your notice that the public at large sees digitization in government as a very positive development where they don't really have to have human interface with government officials. And while my department is kind of partially digitized, our target now is within a foreseeable future to make it 100% digitized. So I think bringing in professional ethics in government is something that we are relying on digitization to a large extent, and I'd like to have your views on that.
Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but I'm very impacted by some of the things that just happened in America. So getting your house right, and that gets back to my digital civics and all these other core values, they actually matter more than ever in this age. And I think that what you're talking about, it will be a net positive because we can now expose cheating and lying so much better. Yes, we have Putin and he can abuse it, but there's enormous upsides as well for governance.
Tom, I wish we can continue forever. The audience is not in a hurry to go away, but I bet you're still fighting your jet lag.
A little bit.
Thank you very much. You've been very patient, and it's
my
been
pleasure.
a great conversation. And
Wonderful
thank you very much for watching. Next time, Tom Friedman comes into town, we'll ask for OTC to be made a 3-hour show. It's been riveting. Thank you very much, and come back for the next edition.
Thanks, my friend. That's great. Wonderful.